Let's say someone is taking a psychology class, and they write a paper based on a personal observation that people seem to stick with their beliefs, even if they've been given evidence that shows those beliefs are wrong. They title the paper Belief Stuckness, and they use examples from their own life. However, they don't cite any of the resources from the textbook or the academic research that the professor has assigned them to read. When the professor asks why the student ignored the academic literature, they say that they wanted to have an original thought about psychology. The professor says there have been psychologists discussing this idea for a long time. They call it belief perseverance, and it's connected to a bigger concept called confirmation bias. The professor explains that if the student had read and referred to the many scholars who have studied these effects in psychology, they'd be able to write something truly new, where they add a little to the existing conversation on this overall idea. As is, their original thought was actually just something other people named differently in the past. Joining a conversation rather than writing alone is a big part of why we have to cite, quote, and paraphrase. These are the writing tools available to give credit to all the thinkers who have come before us as we work to write something helpful or original. Hi, I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, and this is Study Hall Rhetoric and Composition. When we're ready to dive into a conversation with other writers, we need a way to tell readers whose ideas are whose. To do that, we rely on citations. A citation is a structured indication that particular words, ideas, or other source material come from somewhere else. Citations are a kind of shorthand that allows readers to get a lot of information in just a little bit of space. For instance, if we saw Zarka 2020 page 60 in a paper using APA citation, we'd get a ton of info at once. First, we know the author who wrote the original source. We know the year the source was published, and the page number where the information came from. What's more is that we'd be able to go to a more detailed list at the end of the document, where we could scroll to the very end and learn the name of the article by Zarka, as well as other publishing details that help us find it. That's a big reason why we cite. Some readers may be so interested in our work that they go back to that source, and they need to know some details about that source to get there. If our readers are expecting APA style, they get a bunch of information when our citations are formatted correctly. However, if I just wrote Zarka said this at the end of the sentence with no publication info, no page number, and no detailed list at the end, I've technically cited, but I'm not giving all the information I'm expected to give, or using the format that makes sense to my readers. This is why there are two levels of citation excellence. First, commit to showing clearly when we're using the work of someone else. Second, get the details of the citation formatting right. Those details help readers shortcut to valuable understanding. MLA, APA, Chicago. There are a lot of different citation formats out there, and it can feel overwhelming. But we don't have to give up on getting the details right. Once we know what to look for, we can learn about almost any academic citation style. A style is just the accepted format by which a field like psychology or a professional organization like the Modern Language Association has agreed to do citations. Nearly every citation style guide gives us a way to cite in text, adding information in parentheses or footnotes that shows the readers exactly which sentence is referring to another source. These in-text citations are shortened versions of the information included in a bibliography or reference list, which is a list at the end of the document that gives us more details so that we can find that exact source if we want. The guidelines are detailed and specific. Things like putting the author's name before the title of the source and the publication details, and using commas and periods in really specific places. It can take some getting used to, and they do sometimes update them, changing the rules. That's why we don't need to memorize most citation styles. Instead, our professors will often give us resources that help, and we can also look online. What's great is that if we're studying in a particular field, like psychology, the most common ways of using APA style will probably become second nature. For the less common citations, most of us just look up what we don't remember offhand or use citation generators, even professors. Though we should be sure to check the robot, because we should never trust robots or Ouija boards. Now, there's another good reason why we cite that you may have heard about: We want to avoid plagiarism, especially in academic and professional contexts. Plagiarism is when our work represents the words, ideas, or work of other people as our own. We can unintentionally do this, like when overwhelmed writers just skip the citation even if they internally know which work is theirs and which isn't. Or when we're doing research and we read a great idea but forget to take notes, and then go write our paper using that idea. But it's also possible to do it intentionally, copying someone else's work or trying to pass off someone else's words as ours for our own benefit. Because it's hard to tell whether plagiarism is intentional or not, it's generally very serious no matter what our intention was. If we put our names on the work of someone else, like a book or story, and try to sell it as our own, it can be treated as theft. And in many educational settings, it's considered so dishonest and untrustworthy that it can jeopardize our careers at school. So we've got some info on how to cite and why, but what we are citing matters too. Even with citations, we're not dropping whole pages of other people's work into our final essays. So let's consider the typical accepted ways of using outside sources in our writing: paraphrase and quotation. They both make it possible to enter conversations clearly, bringing multiple people's ideas together to make new points. Let's say the psychology student from earlier sets out to rewrite that confirmation bias paper, but wants to build on the ongoing conversation in psychology about that kind of bias. They want to give their readers a basic definition of it, so they choose a direct quotation or highlighting someone else's ideas word for word. They cite the Encyclopedia Britannica definition: the tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with one's existing beliefs. They use quotation marks to indicate that this is exactly what the encyclopedia said, and, of course, add an in-text citation. Once they've introduced the idea, however, the student wants to quickly run through some of the other research that confirms that people really do think this way, picking and favoring the evidence that lets them keep believing what they already believe. They find a study that summarizes 26 different experiments where memory researchers found evidence for confirmation bias. Instead of copying and pasting from the long and exhaustive study, they paraphrase, writing a description of the source in their own words. The studies confirm that people remember facts and experiences better if they fit with their pre-existing expectations, and are more likely to forget evidence and information that was counter to their beliefs at the time. In this way, they're able to cover more ground, and since it's their own words, they don't use quotation marks, but they still include a citation so that anyone who wants to know more on that topic can find the original study and read it deeply. Once they've established what the psychological literature says about confirmation bias, the student is able to present their new additions to the conversation, discussing their own research into how social media flagging features do and do not help people overcome their confirmation bias. Because their paper starts with a conversation that's already in progress, the psychology student's ideas can go farther than just satisfying their own curiosity. Besides being the right thing to do, using paraphrase and quotation can help strengthen our writing. We become more credible when it's clear that we've researched the subject, and we can establish that what we have to say is worth noting because others have spent time thinking and writing about it too. But we have to remember that these tools are not just a bulleted list of all the relevant sources. Most quotations or paraphrases are introduced with a sentence that talks about the connection between them and our topic. Then the writer follows up with more explanation and commentary, bringing forth the clear relevance of this idea. Most quotes or paraphrases will be in the middle of paragraphs because they need our insight before and after to make them truly fit. After all, in essays, we're often trying to show professors how we've connected with the material, and that's less clear when a quote is just sitting in our paper, unintroduced and unexplained. And in workplace settings, we are usually using quotes and paraphrases of other people's work to support a course of action or to give a rationale. So we still need that connection why this outside source is an additional point in our argument. In any given class, if we're concerned or curious about how quotations, paraphrase, and citations are used, one valuable resource we can ask our professor for is an example paper with citations. We can ask for one that isn't at all relevant to the topic so that we won't end up copying anything about it. From it, though, we can see what citations look like, where they're located, and how quotes and paraphrases fit into paragraphs. The internet is full of good resources too, and solid places to start for reputable guidance include university library websites and writing center websites. Evaluating and analyzing sample papers and online resources can make us much more confident as we work on our own papers, both that we're citing in ways that are ethical and honest, and also that we are giving the audience a valuable set of information about further reading they might need. Plus, there's something really cool about not writing alone. Whether we are decades into research on a single field or are taking an intro class, we get to be part of the conversation with all the other people who are thinking about this topic. Maybe they'll eventually cite us, too. Thanks for watching Study Hall Rhetoric and Composition, which is part of the Study Hall Project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you like this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall in the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time.